Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL. Good morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here with you. Welcome into Coffee. Today is Monday, March 24th, the year of our Lord 2025, and certainly happy that all of you have decided to join me this morning or afternoon, wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening. Mondays are always a good day because there's actual ball, some sort of sport to talk about, action on the field. It's less topical and more reflective, and that's the case for coffee, for the morning show, the show. John Whittle will be in to talk about all things on the morning show, and my guess is, it's just a guess, they're going to talk a lot about the baseball team, which had a unfortunate series this past weekend, a bad series. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, folks. They go down run ruled one night, 12-2, 12-3 the next night, and then yesterday fell apart late and lost 11-4 to third-ranked Arkansas. I don't know, man. This is not shaping up to be a good season. Haven't really had a great feeling about this team, even when they were beating, the Morehead States of the world or Sacred Hearts or whoever. You never can really tell in baseball when they're playing the teams that aren't very good. Then the Clemson series happened, and then the Oklahoma thing, and it's just it's been a mess. They can't pitch, they can't hit. Fielding is solid, but it's frustrating to watch because yesterday, it was a situation where they got up, they came back, but team has a bad habit of not cashing in when there's the opportunity there. They hit it in double plays a lot. They, 4-4 yesterday. You have the bases loaded and, a pop up, two pop ups. I mean, it's been frustrating. And then, of course, the pitching falls apart. And Arkansas gets a 7-run inning. Guys that have pitched well. I mean, it's inconsistent. It's just, and it's not going to get any easier. You got North Carolina and Tennessee this week. So, baseball, sometimes a team will get it and, they'll catch fire, get a hot streak, get going. But, there's no power in this lineup. It's just, I mean, it's not, certainly hasn't been what I think the expectation was heading into the season by most. I think some people thought this would not be the best South Carolina team ever. And, you got series after series of good teams. You just got to kind of hope that they'll find a way to put it together. But so far, it hadn't been good. I mean, everything from getting off to bad starts. When you do get off to a good start, it doesn't hold, and then complete collapses in innings. It's just, I don't know. Sometimes I'm trying to think back to first years, and we haven't had very many around here, of course, because Ray Tanner was here for a long time, and his first team, Carolina, was coming off a losing season, and they actually had a winning season. And that was kind of a nice progressing season. I think the next year, year two, he was in the tournament. So that was kind of a, different first year. Holbrook inherited a really good team from Tanner in 2012 and went to the Supers. And then I remember, Kingston went to the Supers his first year, and that team sort of struggled. I mean, they were like 20-17. I can remember they lost to Presbyterian at home. And after that game, they kind of turned it around, made it all the way to the Super Regionals. Ironically, at Arkansas, lost 2-1, one game from Omaha that season under Kingston. But Holbrook had left a lot of really good players. They just kind of had to get it together. I don't know enough to say one way or the other about this team, but They haven't shown any signs of, oh, these guys are good, but they're just all in a slump at once. Because it does seem, relative to competition, when they play somebody good, they look overmatched. Even against Oklahoma, you could, and just my opinion, and not a baseball expert by any means, it just kind of looked like Oklahoma had better players, top to bottom, that came through in clutch situations. So I don't know what needs to happen to turn this thing around, but it's not looking pretty. And like I said, baseball's funny. You can turn it and surprise people, but it is not looking good right now at all. Women's basketball team defeated the Indiana Hoosiers 64-53, and that's after beating Tennessee Tech 108-48. So they're going back to the Sweet 16. Nice win. Indiana is a team that sort of gave them some problems last year. So that's we'll see what happens there. And they'll move forward and play in Birmingham. I don't remember exactly who. Alabama is one of the teams. Maybe it's Alabama and Duke. Nope, Duke's already in. Um, but they'll play in Birmingham coming up. Alabama and Maryland. The Alabama Maryland winner. And I believe that game is in College Park this afternoon at 5. So that's in Birmingham. So playing Alabama and Birmingham, that'd be interesting. Curious to see what kind of crowd the Tide would bring if they do make it. Maryland, of course, is a familiar opponent through the years. The Gamecocks have played them in the tournament several times. On the other side of the bracket, number 2 seed Duke advanced over Oregon. They play the winner of West Virginia and North Carolina. So it could be Duke and North Carolina. And on the women's side, also in Birmingham, Alabama. So we'll see what happens there. Like I said, Indiana's a team that's been giving the Gamecocks some trouble through the years, and they did. They actually had a lead, and the Gamecocks pulled away in the second half for an 11-point win. So we'll see what happens moving forward with that sport. Transfer portal opens today in men's basketball. I believe maybe both basketball transfer portals are open. And so over the weekend and I guess last week, just a recap, Zach Davis is in the portal. Arden Conyers is in the portal. Tyler Hero is in the portal. Was there one more? I think that's it for right now. So we'll see what happens. I do expect a roster revamp this year. I think that when you kind of look, will Colin Murray Bulls come back? I'm told it's possible, but I'm not counting. I'm not counting on that happening, just because he is projected to go pretty high in the draft. And in that you're talking about big money. Basketball, there's big money. So I think the fun thing probably is who they're going to get. Who goes, who stays. That's going to work itself out. I wrote last week. I think that Butler and then the 2 Finnish players are probably safe bets to come back without guaranteeing if they will or not. That's Ugasuk and Federico, and then or Ugasuk and Federico, and then of course Butler, the 7-footer that shoots threes from Columbia, who kind of did some good things down the stretch. He's got to get a lot better, especially in the paint. But he's sort of a specialty player anyway. But some of those rebound attempts and stuff, I mean, man, just go up and get the ball. So we'll see who the Gamecocks end up getting out of the transfer portal. They have 4 coming in, including Eli Ellis from the freshman rank. I don't think that's going to change. So we'll see what happens. Zach Davis, disappointing season, regressed in a lot of ways in the portal. We'll see where he lands. Conyers, really promising off season, and kind of gave him a scoring boost when he started playing, but then his time started getting less and less and less, down the stretch. And then Tyler Hero never played hardly at all. So we'll see kind of how it goes. Don't forget they have 15 scholarships to work with instead of 13. So there's room on the roster for everybody. And I want to say this too, just before we get started with this, because I think sometimes, with all the transfer portal stuff, we tend to, I don't know, look at it maybe from and you really shouldn't look at it from a football standpoint, because if you look at what the football program's done through the portal, it hasn't mattered. But I already have seen some snide comments on social media and things about, oh, he's going to assemble a mid-major all-star team. Well, the Florida Gators are a pretty good basketball team. They're one of the 7 SEC teams in the SEC tournament. I went through their roster. Their top players, 3 of them are from Iona, Florida Atlantic, and Belmont. So there you go. And Clayton's from Iona, Martin is from Florida Atlantic, and Richard is from Belmont. And then they got a kid from Australia. They got a kind of an under the radar guy, forward they got out of Pennsylvania from the high school ranks. You got to go down to Aberdeen to find one of their top scorers that's not, kind of off the beaten path. And Todd Golden runs a system. He's kind of a system coach, as is Lamont Paris. They're dramatically different, obviously. Golden's more up and down the court, shoot the three, score points, high tempo, and Lamont's more slow it down. But hey, their NIL budget, from what I'm told, was less than what South Carolina will have to work with this year. And you see all these reports. Oh, they're going to spend $8 million. They're going to spend that. I've looked at that, and I saw it in football too. I mean, you see things like Georgia's spending $20 million. Georgia didn't spend $20 million. So I don't know. I do think that prices NIL wise are going to be higher across the board. And I've explained that with the House settlement lawsuit being finalized potentially, probably on April 7th. The rules state that once that's settled, you can't sign a front-loaded deal, or you can't sign a deal that's not subject to the new NIL clearinghouse after that date, and you have to have it paid out by July 1st. Previously, it was thought just get everything done by July 1st and you're golden, but that's not going to be the case. I'm curious to see in the second portal window for football how that impacts prices. You can always do creative accounting as well with that and say, well, this is really coming out of rev share and all that stuff. But those are the numbers. And I do think South Carolina is going to have more resources to go spend in the portal this time around and to be competitive. Keep in mind, don't get intimidated by seeing these big budget things going, floating around the internet. Number one, don't believe everything you hear. Number two, don't get intimidated by that. I mean, Florida, and I use it as an example because they're really good. Florida had, probably when you go towards the bottom of the league, that 8 to 12, if you rank them all, as far as resources in the portal, South Carolina just needs to get in the game. I mean, they weren't in the game this past year, NIL wise, but that's kind of a long story too, because they didn't think that there wasn't like this great big push to get more. I think they thought they would be much better this past season. So I hesitate to just say NIL, but I've said for a long time, NIL can fix it. But if you're expecting the Gamecocks to go sign a bunch of high major transfers that you're familiar with from watching power conference basketball this year, then you're going to be pretty sadly mistaken, because I think the way in college basketball that a lot of teams do it this year is they do go get good players from the mid-major level. Everybody was kind of worried about teams in football becoming farm teams. And I think, and look, the group of five and FCS, they do get hit in the portal in football, but there's so many football players. There's 11 different positions on each side of the ball. Not every program has needs at certain positions. Basketball is different. It's a, 15 man roster scholarship wise now. And, you have your top guys in your rotation and it's just siphoned off. And I think for a long time now, even before the portal, basketball was transfer nuts. A lot, a lot of lower mid-major guys would go up and make an impact at the high major level in that particular sport. Texas Tech, when Chris Beard was there, they played for the national title, lost to Virginia. By the way, shout out Ryan Odom. Dave Odom's son is now the head coach of the Cavaliers. So congrats to that family. I know Dave Odom loved the Virginia job, and so now his son is the head coach at UVA. But they lost to Virginia, but they had a bunch of transfers from lower levels on that team. So my point is, don't be outraged if you see, well, this guy's from St. Francis or this guy's from this. And keep in mind too, BJ Mack came from Wofford. Talon Cooper came from Minnesota, sure, but Talon also was at Morehead State. Janai Broom at Auburn was his teammate. So just don't. I can sense it now that some folks are going to take exception of, taking a kid out of the Southern Conference, but that's in basketball, that's kind of the way. That's the way. Florida won the SEC tournament, was number 1 seed this year, and they didn't spend as much as Arkansas and Kentucky. I can tell you that right now, or some other schools in the league that are out now. By the way, Sean Miller is the new head coach at Texas. They fired Rodney Terry, and Sean Miller's Xavier team put him out of the tournament at the first 4 in Dayton, and now he's got his job. So that's tough. Chris Del Conte, the IED at Texas, Jeremiah Donati is his protege. They work together at TCU. It's interesting how he works. A friend of mine actually sent a text and said that's how coaching change should work. You fire the guy, you get another guy in. That's not the first time he's done that. I believe he did it with Tom Herman. He had Sarkisian lined up, announced him the next day. Of course, remember Texas A&M's Jim Schlossnagle played for the national championship one day, and he was the head coach at Texas the next. And then he had Sean Miller lined up and ready to go. Texas is a very attractive place in all sports. So it's not surprising that you could go cut a deal behind the scenes and do that there. Hats off to Carolina softball winning their series, another top 15 series win over Texas Tech. Game 3 got weird. They had a drop dead time because they flew commercial. Texas Tech did, to go back to Lubbock. And so they just stopped the daggum game. That was it. 6-5. So, I don't know. I don't know how this stuff works. I know they used to do that in baseball, but man, just ended it in the middle of an inning. I don't. Oh well, refs and umps and all that. I don't know that I'd have a very good morning if I went through my issues with some of the umpire and refereeing, what have you, around college sports the last week or so. But they did win, and they keep right on trucking. They've had a pretty good year so far as surpassing expectations, and that's always good. All right, so football rolls on today. Mike Shula and Clayton White will address the media. They have coordinator press conferences. Those are always interesting. Of course, I'm sure they're going to ask Mike Shula about personnel and backup quarterback, I think, will be a topic. Clayton White's got to replace a lot of talent on his side of the ball as well. So I'm sure that will come up. And always good nuggets from the coordinators and the assistant coaches in the spring. The position coaches talk in the spring too, and there's a schedule for that. Then the Gamecocks return to the practice field on Tuesday. I'm fighting a cold a little bit this morning, folks, in case you haven't noticed. My stepson, he took some Mucinex yesterday. He was coughing. I heard him coughing just now from his room. but I hope I'm not getting it. So, because it sounds terrible. I know. So I'm kind of plowing through this morning with that. But so yeah, that's happening today, Tuesday. They'll be back on the practice field, spring practice number 3. I did have some insider notes on thebigspur.com for VIP members yesterday about some of the early standouts. And if you want to go join thebigspur.com, obviously there's some specials they're running. Go check it out. It's pretty in depth. But the big takeaway from my conversations with various contacts, sources, whatever you want to call them, it kind of hit me because just about everybody I talked to folks about mentioned speed. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Speed is important. Okay. And in the Southeastern Conference in football, it's even multiply that times about 4 or 5. It's one of those things where if you don't have speed, the athletes are so good in the league. And I'll throw Clemson's on the schedule every year. They're not lacking for speed at Clemson. So I'll throw them in. If you're a Florida and you play a Florida State, and then some years Miami as well, you need speed. I feel the need for speed to quote Top Gun. I mean, you got to have it. Too often around here in previous seasons when things haven't gone all that well, there are speed deficiencies at different positions at different times. I think at one point recently is linebacker. Let's just call it like it is. Slower. They're not slow, but they're not fast. Demetrius Knight Jr. coming in last year and being able to run like he did was a big difference. That was, if you look at all that he is as a player, his biggest attribute is his speed. You brought in this guy from Charlotte, 96 tackles, great. That's cool. That's cool. Well, he runs 22 miles an hour on the GPS. That's really cool. And at the time, we didn't know he's going to be like the spiritual and emotional leader of the team. He's an older guy, everybody looks up to him. That's even more cool. And I don't know how you replace that part of it, but the speed part of it, I think you can replace. And I was told Justin Okoronkwo, who is one of my favorite guys that they got out of the portal, is indeed fast. We know Fred Johnson, who I think can be a beast this year and maybe even an upgrade, is fast, and he's 244 pounds. That's moving. And so I started thinking about it. I was like, yeah, that's interesting because Shane Beamer, if you look at the recruiting and almost across the board at every position, they've brought in fast guys. And like I said, too often it hasn't been that way. I remember some secondaries that had taller guys in them, but they couldn't run. Great to have that height and length. And Torian Gray, the current secondary coach, loves that. But if they can't run, you're going to get beat. And you sort of look at some of the numbers on some of the guys, like Nick Emanwore. There's a bigger guy, but guess what? He can run 4.35. That's a freak. That's great. Sometimes at receiver through the years, I think that you had one receivers coach that I think was always trying to, I call it searching for Sydney. I think he was always trying to find Sidney Rice, Steve Spurrier Jr., and never did. And I know Alshon Jeffrey was a bigger receiver like Sydney. Alshon was a little bit different. He's thicker, not quite the jumping jack, still a freak. And I'm not sure that on the recruiting trail, Spurrier Jr. was necessarily all that fired up about Alshon Jeffrey when they took him. In fact, I know he wasn't. And so I think he spent a long time doing that. Then he signed a guy named Deebo Samuel and left him for the next regime. And those guys are McClendon. I think he was always looking for Deebo. Well, here's the problem with both of those things is that, the 6'4" guys that are athletic like Sidney Rice can go up and get it. They're very rare. So if you're just checking 2 of the 3 boxes, Well, yeah, well, he's tall and he can jump, but he can't. He's not really like sneaky fast like Sydney, and no ball skills, no basketball, anything like that. You're going to get just a tall guy. If you go and you say, well, I want Debo Samuel, 220-pound receiver that looks like a running back that has great speed. Well, if you just say I want a bigger receiver and you don't have that 4'4" and it's a 4'6", that guy's going to grow into some kind of player that, if he's 225 pounds, that, he's too short to play tight end and not a linebacker and not a running back. So I don't know. I haven't confirmed that was like, okay, that's the plan the whole time, but it sure seemed that way because they brought in a lot of guys that physically, size wise, were copies of Sidney Rice and Debo Samuel that weren't very good. So I don't know. I think that that happens sometimes. I think it happened in the secondary during the Spurrier era as well. With Lorenzo Ward wanting the taller corners, which is smart, but they have to be able to run. And that's what I kind of like about what these guys have done here. And look, that's not to put any previous staff members down. I mean, those guys, they did the best they could. Hindsight, it's real easy to point out like things that went wrong. I'm not trying to be this uber critic. I'm just telling you this for context because I've seen it happen at other schools too, where they kind of fall in love with a prototype and you never find that guy again because he's rare. We talk about rarity all the time. But I think Beamer and staff have done a good job finding guys that can run. And like I said, I talked to a lot of players, and the speed came up. Jalen Brown, a player from Missouri, they got out of the portal, who I think could end up starting at the edge. That could be the answer opposite Dylan Stewart. Boy, he can run 265 pounds. Brandon Cisse, boy, he can run. You look at all of it. Okoronkwo, Johnson, they can all run. Rasul Faison can run at running back. Good feedback on him as well. So you sort of look at the receivers that Mike Fury's brought in, and they all can run. I mean, this group that they brought in from the high school ranks with Donovan Murph coming in later, they're all fast guys. Lex Cyrus is a track guy. Jordan Gitteron is a track guy. Malik Clark is a 4.45 guy. Donovan Murph is a 4.45 guy. Pup Sellers is a 4.4 guy. Brian Rowe is a 4.4 guy. That's important. A receiver, I think it's a blend, size, speed combo, and you need some explosiveness and wiggle and all that good stuff. But because if you're too small, and we've seen this with some players, it's hard to get off the line, get open sometimes, especially with bigger DBs that you face at this level of football. But you won't speed over size, like Brian Rowe and Lex Cyrus and Pup Sellers they're on the skinny side, right? If you saw them now, you'd be like, well, these guys they need a biscuit, take them to Chick-fil-A for the chicken biscuit. I miss the Chick-fil-A chicken biscuit because there's not a Chick-fil-A near where I live, and so I have to go 2 towns over to get one. And so morning times I'm busy running around, never get a chance to do it. Anyway, get him a biscuit. Get him a biscuit. That's what you say. But they can run, and they can add the weight without losing speed. Malik Clark's already pretty big. Gitteron is young, and you're going to hear me say that quite a bit. And he's got a frame though. And he's already 190 pounds. But all these guys can run, so that's different when you kind of look at roster construction. And because of the transfer portal and because of, the different ways a roster comes together, recruiting rankings, all that good stuff, it's probably an aspect of Shane Beamer's recruiting here that's gotten lost a little bit. Is the fact that the Gamecocks are a much faster football team than they have been the last 10 years. And they were last year, and they will be this year. Now, Fast football teams sometimes go 5-7. That's not a predictor of success. Uh, the guys I reported on that looked pretty good coming out of the first couple of days of spring, that doesn't mean winning or losing. That doesn't mean anything as far as the outcomes go. There's a lot that has to happen for this football team to come together. And honestly, the unfortunate part about it, and I just know this because I know how the fan base rolls. Again, you guys and gals have really had 1 month to be happy, outside of women's basketball in the past year because football before November was 4-3. Nice win at Oklahoma, but kind of the same, 4-3, 500. Hope to get to a bowl kind of game team, and then 1 month of glory, and then the toe stub in the bowl that left not a terrible taste in everybody's mouth because ultimately teams that lose bowl games come back and win national championships from time to time. You guys remember 2001? The Gamecocks beat Ohio State in the Outback Bowl for the second straight time down in Tampa. Field goal there at the end after blowing a 28-0 lead. Guess who won the national championship in 2002? Ohio State. So there's no precedent that says, hey, if you win your bowl, your chances of success. It's a feeling thing, which is important because you want people excited and fired up. But anyway, that from a fan standpoint, especially if you spent money to go down there and you see just all the crap that happened in that game, and then losing on top of that to a team that they should have beaten. I don't care how good Illinois is; they should have beaten them. They were a better team than Illinois. Illinois upset them, but upsets happen, right? I'd rather take an upset against Illinois in the Citrus Bowl than take an upset against Vandy at home this coming year. It's like the football gods are like, it's your time to take one. Oh, man, I'll take the one in the Citrus Bowl. Trust me. But, and then you had basketball, which was promising. Even Lamont Paris is talking about Cam Scott being all SEC and how they are not interested in finishing 11th. Obviously, they weren't because they finished 16th. But and then that just, God, close loss after close loss and then blowout. And then sometimes, just like the baseball team collapses at bad times, basketball did that. And now baseball, which has always been in my lifetime, the kind of the season you look forward to, because they're usually just pretty good. So, yeah, you folks out there, I understand if you're a big Gamecock fan and we're in this new era and people are kind of gravitating to, it's just not fun anymore. Well, it's not fun because you've had 1 month of good things. It really, I don't think it has much to do with NIL and the transfer portal. I think it has more to do with, the Gamecocks have had 1 month of in men's sports that you can feel really good about things, unfortunately. And, with recruiting, I understand like the new era. Well, these guys, I actually think for high school recruiting, it's brought things into perspective because people aren't freaking out that Carolina's high school recruiting class is 11th in the SEC out of 16. It's like, oh, well, and they're more focused now on individual players and who's good and in-state recruiting. And I think that's a positive way to do it. I think it is because even in the years where it turns out like your program, let's say South Carolina, for example, recruited an average of the 15th ranked class in the country. And let's say Tennessee recruited an average of the 8th. And people are like, oh, 7 spots in a football poll, the AP poll, that's significant. It's really not in recruiting. It's digits. It's a number here, a number there. But you still look at it, Tennessee's going to be pretty good. Well, then you look at it and South Carolina's, gone whatever and gone to 4 straight bowls, and Tennessee's making another coaching change. That's kind of sometimes how that works. And I believe that the good thing is we're getting more and more separated from the Alabama Saban era, which mad respect for Nick Saban. Love Nick Saban. Have absolutely nothing against Alabama. I have a lot of friends that are Alabama fans. If I wasn't a Carolina fan, I'd probably consider being an Alabama fan. But I would have done that before Saban because I wasn't going to be a front runner, right? But it, uh, it wasn't good for a lot of fan bases because all you saw was number one class after number one class, and then national championships are great. SEC championships are great seasons. They're always in the mix. It's hard to sustain. It's hard to win it every year, but they somehow ended up winning a bunch and playing for a bunch, and they were really good. And it kind of sucked the oxygen out of the room with recruiting. And then you had a little thing at the end, a tail end thing where Georgia, which I think Georgia or Ohio State won, ended up having the number one class. And then Georgia was dominant 2021 all the way through 2023 when they lost to Bama in the SEC championship game. Doesn't that suck? The Big Ten wants to brag. Oh, we've won. Yeah, you just better be glad that that Georgia team was not a Georgia, that they didn't make the playoff that year. And Michigan got to play, Michigan, instead of playing Alabama, had to play Georgia, and then Georgia played Washington. We would have had Georgia Bama again, just to remind everybody like that. And that was a great Michigan team that I thought, when it came down to the last four teams of the playoffs, was clearly the best team, and they won. But yeah, I mean, they were dominant. So that extended that. Well, Georgia's the new Bama. Georgia's not the new Bama. Kirby Smart, in an interview with Josh Pate, is sitting there saying, that was my best coaching job this past year because guess what? We were deficient. And that's because of portal. There were other things that happened, injuries and things like that, but portal defection. And portal, when you had injuries at Alabama under Saban and he's stacking classes, and he's getting the benefit of the doubt because he's the best evaluator in football. So if you're out there doing rankings and he takes a guy, yes, there's not a Bama bump, there's a Saban bump. Because chances are that guy's going to end up being pretty good. If you're Carolina, you've got three of his former recruits on your team. You probably hope he is a good evaluator, right? So, I think that's probably part of it as far as why everybody was kind of, the oxygen was sucked out of the room. We got to have the top five class to do this. Not anymore. Not anymore at all. I think, with the portal and all that, it's kind of made people less panicky about that. But as far circling back to all that, I think that with regards to this football season, that's a long way till August, right? And so you kind of have the right mindset about recruiting, which was good. At the same time, this ended up being a really, really, really good class rankings wise. And so the excitement wasn't too up. No, don't get too up, don't get too down. And that's a good way to approach recruiting these days because there's always a chance. But then as far as on the field and on the court goes, it's just not been good. And so, in Carolina fans, it's a football school. There's no question about it. But it's not like a place like Nebraska where, hey, guess what? And they have aspirations at Nebraska in basketball. They hired the mayor, Fred Hoiberg. Hadn't done much with it, never been that good. Or Penn State. Penn State's good at wrestling, which a lot of schools don't even have anymore. But what else is Penn State good at? Occasionally they're okay at women's basketball, and that's a big state university, tons of money, football. A lot of schools pick their poison, so to speak. Clemson's a football school, and they're good at baseball too. And I know they've had a good run under Brunell, whatever, but they're, you look back through their history, and when the ACC schools decide they want to come back and invest in basketball again, because most of them will have no chance in football, then we'll see what happens with Clemson basketball. But South Carolina fans want to win at everything. I mean, they're even though men's basketball, 116 years, 10 NCAA tournaments, not a lot of wins in those tournaments, except once. There's still expectations there, and that's good. I love that. And so when those expectations are not met, then everybody kind of gets down, and then that almost puts some pressure, I guess. on football because football's got to replace how many guys, and then they're reliant on the transfer portal in many ways to do so. And so was men's basketball, and so was baseball. And so you worry, right? Is football, is it time for football to be a disappointment? Don't do that because, as I just explained, this is a fast football team. I don't know, but that's not to play psychologist with the fan base this morning, but that was kind of on my mind. Like I said, under the weather a little bit, under the radar, under the weather a little bit. Be sure to check out my friends at Palmetto Golf and Belt. Golfing season, Masters is right around the corner. Get to looking good for a low price. They have belts, they have towels, they have tees. They got the cool Palmetto and Crescent design in garnet and black for your belting needs, I guess. But they're good guys. Brandon, Gamecock owned and operated. Also, the portal's open, so it's time to buy up some more Gamecock coffee, gamecockcoffee.com. For those of you that have asked about the shipping with that, I'll have an answer today. I don't know why it necessarily has taken 20 days in some instances to get it out, but certainly we'll check on that for you. But go buy coffee and popcorn, gamecockcoffee.com to support NIL and the Garnet Trust. The morning show coming up with Whittle, and then we will have the show with myself and Phil where we're going to go over a number of topics and give you a bracket update for the Ernie Challenge. South Carolina was winning the Ernie Bracket Challenge that many of you entered. Also, the ITG inside the Gamecocks bracket. Got to see if my wife is still beating everybody. I don't think she is because I think she took St. John's as well, which I feel like a loser for taking them. Although I love Rick Pitino, and I did think they would beat Arkansas. They just didn't. That happens. And so away we go. I've already lost my brackets, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway, all right. JC Shurburtt's coffee is over. I'm getting off here, getting ready for my day. See you guys later on the show. Holla at you soon.